Hello, and welcome in to Bear With Us on the Bear Claw Media Podcast. I am Chris Bolin, and if you're looking at the video of this, you're probably like, hey, why is there only one guy on my screen instead of two? And that is because I am rolling solo today. I'm going on hard mode. Ben Schleiger's a very, very busy guy, still a new father. Big, long honey-do list. A lot of time at the in-laws, I say that as it's 10:20 a.m. and Ben is 100% at work right now. So, but nonetheless, we couldn't really find a time between his schedule, my schedule to go together this week. So I figured I would roll solo since I have some thoughts on this UNC basketball team as I've been known to. I think this one's going to be 4 questions kind of about this team. I may even title it 4 burning questions, even though I don't think any of them are particularly that spicy. They're just kind of a little bit of an outline to somewhat try to keep me on track here so I don't ramble too much, even though I'm sure I'll end up right there anyway. But let's jump into I guess off the top, UNC 15-6 this year. One of the best years in Division I history up until this point. 7-1 in Big Sky play. They play on tomorrow, because this is Friday morning. They play tomorrow to go for their best conference start in school history. They started 7-0 in 2010-11 when they made the tournament, but then immediately lost their next 2 conference games. So 8-1 with a win over NAU on Saturday would put them at their best conference start in D1 history. But the record is also probably up there, but I didn't have it in me. I don't have a handy dandy printout from Michael High or anything, and I just didn't have it in me to go back through all of the seasons and try to see if this was the best start in D1 history. Though it probably would only have to check a handful of seasons, and I'd imagine it probably is. There was that 2010-2011 year. Then we also had it was a really good year with Linder. I think was like a 9-loss season. If I can click through Ken Palm quick enough. No, they had a 26-12 and a 22-9. So 15-6 is kind of right on pace for that type of record. I think probably on pace to outperform that just a little bit. I don't even want to give BJ Hill credit for it, but he was the head coach. They went 21-11 in that 2010-2011 season. So I mean, if things keep up the way they're going right now, we're really on pace for best season in Division I history, which is crazy. Especially, I think we've earned it with what we've gone through for football for the past 25 years. Haven't really won any games at all. Past 2 years really haven't won any games, but this men's basketball team gives me something to feel good about. So without further ado, let's hop in to my 4 burning questions here. First one is, who's this team's most important player? It's kind of been a theme all season, but that's also weird to say because Langston Reynolds won 3 Conference Player of the Weeks. Isaiah Hawthorne just added one this last week. But this team is just deep. Smiley's talked all season about having 5 starters, the 5 guys plus McCreary and Quinn Danker coming off the bench. And at different times in the season, basically all 7, Danker's kind of struggled a bit. I think it's just he's in a weird role for what he's been used to historically. And I think he's played well in that role, but he just hasn't had a chance yet to take over a game the way I would say 5 other guys have. I'm gonna take out Zach Block. He is starting, but he's there to shoot threes. He can do more, but he's a sniper, as Smiley says, and he just hasn't had a game where he's broken out yet. That Air Force game, he hit 2 big threes late. He's hit a couple big threes late in spots, and he's still shooting 35% on the season, but it feels like he's really due. If we could bet player props in Colorado, I would just start betting Zach Block 5+ threes from here on out and just hoping 1 or 2 hits, because it's bound to the way he can shoot it and the way he just hasn't yet this year. But yeah, most important player, Langston Reynolds, 17 points, 5.7 rebounds, 3.6 assists. Isaiah Hawthorne, 17.6 points, 5.7 rebounds, 1.2 assists. And then have Brock Wisney, 11, 4, and 2. Jaron Riley's 9.6, 5, and 5. And then Marcel McCreary's just taken over. His cumulative stats aren't super impressive, but individual games, he obviously nothing single-handedly, but he very close to single-handedly won that Montana State game. The big spearheaded that 20-point comeback just when nobody could do anything. He just couldn't miss a three there in that late in that game. So it's really it's up in the air. It's crazy because when things are rolling, I think Langston Reynolds is the best player. Like when the offense is popping, the ball is moving, he's getting back cuts, everybody's hitting him, he's just breaking out, defense is playing well, he's getting transition buckets. I think when this team is at their peak, he's their best player. But with how the season's gone, especially lately in conference, this team hasn't really played at their peak, which kind of insert Isaiah Hawthorne. I think that Eastern Washington game was a perfect example. A couple weeks ago when Jacob came on, I was said something along the lines of he feels like the MPJ on this offense, where the other four guys are kind of doing the offense, and he's just kind of out there for when you need him, and we needed him big in that Eastern Washington game. I think 32 points. At one point, he had 28 of UNC's 54. Like late in the game, he had more than half of the team's points, which is just crazy. But you need a guy like that because when things aren't going well, you can just say, hey, Isaiah, get me a bucket. And he can say, okay. Whether it's just a couple threes. He has a really slow release on his three, at least from what I can tell. But contests don't seem to bother him that much. So I don't know how much of a problem it is. And I don't really know. I haven't heard any buzz of him as an NBA guy, but I wonder if that's something that some coach will try to fix in whatever pro league he ends up going to. But hasn't seemed to affect him at all here at UNC. Just able to get that three off. Being 6'8" in the Big Sky as a 3 or a 4 helps a lot. Also really silky smooth in the mid-range. Not a lot of people you trust to take mid-range jumpers, and just when he does it, it looks right. It looks like, I don't want to say he's a KD, but it just has that really smooth touch on it. Funny enough, kind of opposite of Jaron Riley, where he's also really good in the mid-range, but every time he takes it, it just doesn't look right. Like he's always turning around, and it feels like he has to put every ounce of power he has into any shot he takes, which he obviously has something figured out. It works. It's just kind of a stark contrast to how easy Zay makes it look. But really also a very possible candidate for most important player on this team. I think he has a sneaky strong case because the senior leadership wise, kind of calming, rallying the troops wise, he's really good at that. And literally every time this season, UNC needs a big bucket, the ball's in his hands. In that Montana State game, the game winner, he dished it right off to Langston Reynolds for the great finish. I believe he got the go-ahead against, was it Sac State? He made 5 of 6 free throws down the stretch just to seal that one. Go-ahead bucket against Idaho that ended up not. It was go-ahead. It was going to be the game winner, if not for that incredible 3 that kid hit. But I'm still salty about that one. He just, anytime, end a shot clock, funny enough, he seems to be the grenade guy, where he doesn't, in my head, he's not a big shot creator, but he has a bag where he'll get into a step back 3. I think he was at Idaho. He hit one at the buzzer halftime. CU, he hit a couple big ones. He's just when this team needs a calming bucket, which they've needed several. And I'm not even mentioning points in the game with 3 minutes left, where Portland State's on a 6-0 run, cut it to a 1 point. Jaron really comes down, gets to that left hand. He's not very fast nor quick. I mean, Rich coming from me, but for this level, he's not the greatest, twitchiest athlete, but he's just impossible to keep from getting to his spots. And if you do stop him, he's going to pump fake 2 or 3 times. You're going to get in the air, and he's going to kind of get his body up into you, which as a point guard is just an incredible skill to have, especially if I don't have it in front of me, but I think he's he's 75, 80%, maybe 83% free throw shooter. Final answer. Where's he at as I take a breath? he is at 83.8, so 84% basically, which free throws have been a little rough at times this season, but when you get, I don't think you can realistically expect a 22-year-old kid to make more than 5 out of 6, with all the pressure in the world on him. Not all the pressure in the world, but, they're fouling you, sending you to the line, you try to ice the game. 5 of 6 is pretty solid at this level. And then we have Brock Wisney, the big man. I guess the not so big man. I think he's listed at 6'9", 245. There's been a couple other guys that they've played that are listed similar that just look bigger than him. But it hasn't, that hasn't stopped him. The only thing that's really stopped him has been foul trouble. He big, I don't want to say a big hacker. He's just in a lot of poor spots. I think when they switch, he's pretty fleet-footed and able to stay in front of guards, but if a guard gets by him, he's real prone to foul, after he's a little bit out of position. And being like a 6'8" rim protector, he's probably not jumping up to block a lot of shots, like little reaches in around the bucket, stuff like that. And, just being generally out of position. But that's, like I said, the only thing that can seemingly stop him. He makes everything around the basket, which is nuts. Because early in the year, he was just missing a lot of little bunnies that weren't gimmies, because they were contested and they played a string of 7-footers in non-con. But it just, they weren't quite falling. He was getting a good shot and it was just bouncing out. And ever since, I don't know, Cal Baptist, no, that's too soon. Definitely DU. I think maybe one game before DU. He's just been, he's kind of locked in more than anything. I think he's just out of whatever slump. I don't know if he's even doing anything particularly different. It's just, he's just making the shots now. And then in the last couple of days, it's weird. He's kind of not extended the range in the way you would think. He's not moving out to 3 and shooting, which I guess he is, but he's always had a little bit of that in him. But those post moves, the little baby hooks have turned into little fadeaways, and they look just as sweet when they come off his hand from 12 feet as they do from 6. So he's a weapon to have, especially. He's at best the third or not best, but at most the third option. And when you have a third option that scored 20 points 3 or 4 times this season, I think you're in pretty good shape, which this 15-6 record would kind of indicate. And then not last and obviously not least, Marcel McCreary. He's just been the man. I struggle with him a bit because when it's not going well, he has a bit of a Russell Westbrook to him where he's forcing the issue because that's what he does, and that's the type of player he is. But when it's not going well, it looks kind of bad. If he's not hitting threes, which he's shooting 43% this season, so it's not like he's missing a lot of threes. But, or if he's just not able to get that little step on somebody, he's still shooting at the basket, and it just doesn't quite look right. But, man, he's exactly what this team needed. He's exactly what this team needs at times. That CU game way early in the year, I know it was a loss, but that turnaround corner 3, he had to send it to overtime. He had a couple more big ones throughout late in the fourth and in overtime. And that's just not a game without him, especially with the foul trouble everybody was in seemingly in that game. And then Montana State. I've mentioned it before. He basically single-handedly pulled this team out of the gutter, brought them all the way back to a point where they ended up winning on that Langston Reynolds game winner with 3 seconds left or so. But then, yeah, I think Quinn Danker, I touched on Block earlier, but Quinn Danker's primed. I don't know if he's primed for a breakout game or if maybe next year he steps into that starting point guard role and all of a sudden things kind of click back into place for him. It's a lot of projecting, but I think the things Quinn does are incredibly helpful. And I've talked about this a lot here and on doing games for Pirate Radio. He's just I think he's a great teammate. Just hearing him talk to guys, he's got so much energy. He's dapping everybody up. He's dapping us up, officials, coaches. Hearing him talk after game. I think it was after the Sac State game. No, Portland State. Either way, I think it's Portland State because they had a go ahead three, and the guy picked up his dribble at half court to like pass or like a running shot from like the volleyball line. It was a really weird sequence, but he picked like Quinn Danker like jumped it, and the guy basically panicked and traveled, and it won the game. So it's stuff like that. He's maybe not hitting threes, which was tough in Eastern Washington because he got a bunch of open ones, but it wasn't just him. Nobody was hitting threes in that game besides Isaiah. But he impacts the game. He's oddly good at getting under the basket and finishing with just a straight like right-handed layup against people like 6 inches taller than him. Really good body control. So I think he's just primed when he steps into a bigger role. More is kind of thrust on his shoulders. It just feels like he's in a position to kind of take off. All right, number 2. What is this team's ceiling/floor? This could have been 2 questions, but I'm not lazy, so I'm putting them all together. The ceiling, talked a little bit about that. The ceiling, when things are rolling, things are rolling. Like I know Langston Reynolds is at the forefront of that because when buckets are coming easy, he's getting a lot of them. I think that Prairie View A&M game stands out. 31 points on like 11 of 13. He's had a couple other games where he's gone 20 plus and missed like 2 shots or less. And when the offense is rolling, because he's just so athletic, he's getting those back cuts, he's getting steals and running out in transition. And it's just impossible to stop. I think probably the best example of that is like a whole team was the Montana game when I think this team got up like 13 early, and that was about as close as it got between the two. So I was trying to pull up a quick box score here. But yeah, in that game, what was it? Yeah, Langston had 17, Isaiah had 17, Wisney had 19. So like when things are popping, yeah, a lot of guys are, that feels like kind of where things are at when it's popping. There's 4 or 5 in double figures. And I think 8 and 1 when 4 players score more than 10 points, with that one loss being Idaho. So they like when things are rolling well, this team is dangerous. But it's kind of weird because even when that's happening, they're still not like the deadliest 3-point shooting team. I think we can probably just generally erase the Colorado Christian game where they scored 100, was it 113? I think they were shooting like 60% from 3 at halftime, and they had made like 12 or something. It just dumb numbers that you're almost never going to replicate. But I worry if that like kind of impacts the absolute top end of this team when it comes to like winning a game or 2 in March Madness, because even when things are going well, they're getting a lot of easy buckets, but they're not. And some of those threes are easy buckets, but they're just not always going in. This is one of the poorer 3-point shooting teams of Smiley's time. What are they? Around 32% on the season, which is the bottom 100 in the country. As opposed to 2-pointers, they're 5th. They're making 60% of their shots inside the arc, which I think bodes well more to raise their floor than it does to really raise the ceiling, because like even if you're not making shots, you're still getting a fair chunk of shots that you almost can't miss. Even when you're struggling at this level, you're gonna make the gimmies. It's that simple. But yeah, when things aren't going well, the floor, they're not making threes, and it's painful when it happens. North Dakota State was an example. Eastern Washington was an example, and that was the kudos to them in their zones that they ran, kind of bounced back and forth between, really gave this team fits. But it causes a lot of like really stale offense. It's like no penetration, a lot of pointless dribbling, like trying to get penetration, but it's a lot of side like east-west, not north-south, which you're going to have times just during a game, during a season, where that's kind of all you can muster. And that's where the Isaiah Hawthorns come in, because you can have 25 seconds of shitty offense. You kick to him, he has a half a second with a hand in his face and he knocks down a 3. So I think he's kind of that floor raiser too, is where as bad as things get, he's always he's consistent. It seems like even when he's not playing well, he's bound to hit a couple big shots. I think Denver DU game was an example of that. He struggled throughout most of it. Hit a big three with, I don't know, 45 seconds left, a minute left. Put UNC up, and they never looked back there. I do think this team has a bit of a weakness to ISO scores, which if that's how you're going to bank on getting all your points, I think that's you're as a coach of this UNC team, you're probably accepting that. You know, like if somebody's just going to break us down off the dribble and make tough mid-rangers, that's an offense you can live with giving up. But if they have a guy who can make all of those shots, I think UNC's in for, not in for it, but you know, that's like a bit of a nick in the armor, is that's somewhere you can attack. Also, if you're knocking down shots, but that's any team. When somebody's shooting hot from outside, there's not a ton you can do. UNC does a great job when that's kind of a team's MO at not letting them do that. Like, I think the scouting report they've been spot on for every game besides St. Thomas, really. Then that St. Thomas, first off, that team's really good. Second off, they shoot a ton of threes, and like I think only took 16 or 18 in that game against UNC. It was like they were playing chess, and I think they anticipated Smiley was going to switch a lot, try to keep hands and faces of shooters. They immediately just started dumping it into the post to a couple bigs who that's not really their game, but they got Zach Block on them. And when you're 6'9" against a 6'1", like you're bound to have some success. And they also just didn't miss at the rim. Like there were a lot of tough layups that they got to the bucket, but once they were there, they didn't miss. So I'm honestly, that was kind of UNC's worst game, but I wouldn't say that's like their floor, just because that was really weird circumstances. And I think that St. Thomas team is really good. I don't think they can actually make the tournament this year, but I think they would have a good chance if they could. Even though have they stumbled a little bit going into conference play? No, they're 7-1. They just lost that one to Omaha. So I think that's about all I have for ceiling floor. I guess going through the season, I would say ceiling, I think they've shown ceiling in conference play is probably 17-1. I don't think that it's possible. I don't think it's realistic. I think they're going to, I would say like the 14-4. That I feel that's a bit of a cop out because Ken Pom has them. Maybe 15-3. I just think one of the Montanas is going to get us at UNC. And then I just think there's going to be another one or two more stupid ones, especially the fact that they've won so many close games, which I think bodes really well to keep winning close games. But the more close games you play in, the more chances you have to lose one. Whereas if they were blowing every team out by 15-20, there'd be a lot less of that kind of, I don't know, variance, but it feels weird to even say that. I think kind of on that note, though, the floor could, like, I don't think this UNC team has something that really makes them special in this Big Sky, but I don't think they're just head and shoulders above the other teams. So realistically, if we looked up in, what is it, roughly a month from right now, they have 1 or 2 games left, and they had lost six games in Big Sky, I'd be bummed, but ultimately, like, this league is tough. I think Weber's still like not a sleeping giant because they've kind of proven that they're not what we thought they were, but I think on any given night they could put up a big fight. I'm worried about this Northern Arizona game on Saturday for some reason. It just kind of vibes wise feels like one of those. I could see McLaughlin going off. They have a couple other good shooters that could get going. So I think probably, though, realistically, ceiling would be 1 seed in this Big Sky tournament. Floor is probably, I don't know, 4. Let's see, do we have a standings here? Yeah, I would say I don't see him dropping below 4, maybe 5. But there's still a lot of time, and with college kids, there's so much variance. if they do end up going one way or another, it'll come down to the 3 tournament games that they have to play. I think they have to play 3 no matter what. I think there could be a chance they would have to play 4, but they'd have to slip pretty far to have to do that. But they could realistically, I think they've beaten all the teams that they may face. Like, they haven't played Northern Arizona. I'm much more scared of like an Idaho State or either of the Montana schools than I am of Idaho. I think if we see Idaho again, I'm not that scared. Idaho State is just, I think they give us problems this year, and they've given us problems every year. It's just one of those teams that just I dislike, So, but I think if they do make the Big Sky tournament, they have every chance to win it. And if they do make the NCAA tournament, I think they have like a win or 2 in them. It's obviously pie in the sky, but I could see like a Zach Block 8-3 game. I'm blanking on the guy's name from Oakland that did it against Kentucky last year. I thought I had it for a sec, but I did not. But, I could see something like that playing out where all of a sudden they face, I don't know, Tennessee. They're a 14-15 seed, face Tennessee. Tennessee just mucks it up. UNC, like, good defense on both sides. Zach Block hits 7 threes in the first half. He's the only thing going. And I could see a game like that. And then it's just, but I think UNC's been very consistent this year in the way they have no bad losses. Idaho's the worst loss by all the metrics, and just watching the game, I'd say that's the worst team they've lost to. But they also don't have any real great wins. Like, all the tournament teams they played, I don't know if Washington State's will actually be in, but Texas Tech, and then who else did they have? Even like St. Thomas, NDSU, those are teams they could definitely have beat. But it feels like the Texas Tech, Washington State games, they could have won, but everything would have to go right. And I guess that's kind of what you're looking at when you're a 14 seed in the NCAA tournament anyway. But there's not necessarily that proof of concept of coming into and facing a team that's just overpowering and kind of hanging in it. CU's the closest, but CU's having a terrible year just by their standards. 0-9 in the Big 12. So yeah, they're in a rough spot. And the Cal Baptist and South Dakota State wins are good. I think that South Dakota State win is probably the best win on the schedule, unless you want to consider Montana just by the margin it happened. But so I think this is realistically, I want to get way ahead of my skis, but also I could see this team kind of coming back to earth a little bit, as much as I really hope that isn't the case. All right. Question number 3, who's going to be back next year? It sucks that we have to ask it, but this is the era we live in. And quite frankly, this is the era Smiley's kind of put us in, where he's developing these guys kind of year after year. If you ask the entirety of mid-major basketball Twitter, Langston Reynolds has already accepted an offer to a Power 5 schooler, already on his way out. It was Dalton Connect, and last year it was St. Thomas, and now it's Langston Reynolds. And I mean, I get it. It makes 100% sense. He's been awesome. He's the type of athlete UNC doesn't typically get, and he's only 6'3". I think he's listed at 6'4", but he's pretty undersized, but 6'3", he's shown he can kind of run an offense. He's not a point guard, but he can be the lead guard. He's improved everything every year, basically. His finishing is fantastic. He finishes great with his right hand, to the point where I forget he's lefty a lot of the time. Just the way he gets to the bucket and has it almost seems like he prefers the right hand at the bucket. But he's just got to improve a little bit as a shooter to really round out the game. But I mean, that's why he's at UNC. He's has all the tools, and now the basketball stuff is actually kind of catching up. So he's been dangerous. And as a junior, he's the one I'm the most afraid of leaving. And I totally understand why, because I think he can. I think if he wants to hop to a bigger school, he definitely has the opportunity. But kind of like a lot of this team, he's a local guy. He's a Denver kid. Jacob brought up a great point. His mom's at all the games. Like, I could see I feel like he'd be much more selective about maybe that means he ends up at CU or CSU next year. But I could there's also a chance he just ends up like wherever. He could end up at, I am blanking on every team that's not great. Iowa. He could go to Iowa. Or a USC type program. I don't think he would be like a top tier type Dalton Connect type transfer, but I could see him in that St. Thomas like realm of getting some solid Power Five in basketball, Power Five offers. But it's still early. I'm sure there are definitely coaches out there and people in his DMs. I'm assuming like kind of pitching the ideas to him already, but it's so early to tell. Um, Other than that, I don't. I'm sure they're not sure. There'll probably be another guy or two who leaves, but Isaiah Hawthorne's a senior. So is Jaron Reilly. So they're both gone for sure. But those are the only two. Like, um, I guess Langston Reynolds is a big one. Brock Wisney, another Colorado kid. He seems like UNC just fits. It seems like he fits at UNC and UNC fits him. That may mean nothing down the road if like a Washington State or Gonzaga come calling or whatever, but I think he's just solid, and I think he's a great Big Sky post player, and I think he's like in the perfect spot. So I hope that he doesn't end up going somewhere, but you can't hate on any of these guys if they do. They all have their own reasons for it, and it never seems like the reason is because fuck Greeley and fuck UNC. I think this program's in a spot where it's putting players on to bigger programs and everybody's kind of happy. It was St. Thomas was like on Twitter giving some flowers after the Montana games. It's a funny concept. Um, but yeah, and Dalton Connect too. I'm a little salty at him because he feels like he's just not ignored UNC, but he's a Tennessee guy, and I get why. But because that was probably such a fucking cool year for him that I can't blame him one bit. But I'm like, man, come on, you spent 2 years here. You can't just give us a little shout out here and there. But Zach Block, redshirt junior as well. Same as Wisney. I think he's where he needs to be. And I think he's in a spot where they want him to shoot and they like empower him to take open shots on the 2-man game, Smiley's podcast with Brady Hall. He mentioned a 3 in that Eastern Washington game pretty late. Block took an open 3 in transition. Hadn't made one all game, didn't make that one. But Smiley was like, I would have been livid if you hadn't taken that shot. So I think he's empowered in a way where like everybody around him knows that he's going to break out of this shooting slump at some point. It's just a matter of when. And he's still shooting 35% on the season, and it feels like he hasn't made a shot in weeks. So I've said it 6 times already this podcast. There's a breakout coming, and I'm just waiting for it. Marcel McCreary, I think he's him out. I'll go McCreary. I don't want to put him and Danker together. I think he'll be back next year. I think he'll step into the starting lineup, and I think he'll be kind of a little like an improved version of what he is this year. That energy guy, like chaos. He's like a bowling ball down the getting it in transition and going coast to coast. He's shown flashes where I don't know. Maybe I'm just a homer and Wisney and McCreary and Langston Reynolds and Block all leave because they're riding kind of the high of this great season. And it's like probably the best opportunity, like the best time they have. But I don't know. He seems he's in a good spot too. He came from Air Force. And I think if he was going to leave, the year would have been last year because he didn't really play. He, very spotty minutes. It was one of those guys where if he would have transferred out last year, I would have been like, bummer. But like, yeah, I wouldn't have had him in that like the St. Thomas DeJour Reeves, like, damn, like we're missing, So maybe that changes after this year. Who knows? But I think he's slated to slide into the starting lineup, and just kind of continue his growth here at UNC. And same with Quinn Danker. I think he was awarded an extra year because of the Pavia stuff, because he spent some time at a JUCO. So he has one more year. He said he didn't want to leave Idaho, like he didn't want to leave, but shit just kind of hit the fan last season, which makes a lot of sense why he ended up at another Big Sky school, because everything seems to fit. Like, this is the level that seems kind of best for him to be able to shine, but still like a high level. And like I said on the last question, I just think he's kind of struggling to find how he fits in and when he needs to be aggressive and when he needs to kind of take a step back. And I think if he ends up playing he's at 19.8, 20 minutes a game this year, if he bumps up to 30, I think a lot of it figures itself out. And especially with really gone, I think this team next year will need a lot of what he brings. Like, he'll be that steadying force. Really's the coach's son, so is he. His dad coached at CSU for a couple years. Was the women's head basketball coach. But I don't want to jinx anything, so I'll knock on this desk that I'm sure is not made of actual wood. But it just seems like he's in the spot he wants to finish his career at, and he just seems like he's having fun here. And I mean, when you're winning, everything's a lot more fun, because it just is. And I wonder, maybe I'll get a chance to ask him. I wonder if he'd rather, like, was he having more fun scoring like 13, 14 a game for Idaho, who was kind of Midland last year, or coming off the bench and not doing as much, but like being a big cog in a winning program. All right, going down the roster, we have a trio. I think Egan Shields will probably be back, just because I have no idea why he wouldn't be. He's a redshirt freshman, getting playing time as a freshman, which not a ton do under Smiley. He's just green, man. He's big, and I think he has a lot of skill. He's just green, so I think he ends up staying. Then after that, I'm a little unsure. Tayshad Jackson, he's a junior. He averaged close to 10 and 10 at VMI last year. He's only 6'6". He's been getting more run, almost as in place of Egan Shields recently, where he's kind of like the backup 5. And I just wish he wasn't hurt all non-conference, so we could get an idea of like what his game really is. And he's only getting about 8 minutes, so I think he's forcing it a bit when he's in, especially like taking some threes and stuff like that. But I would like to have him back, but that's one where this may not have been the opportunity he thought it was going to be. And while he's getting some playing time contributing, I anticipated him in a bigger role. I think most people, when he came in, thought the same. I think most people were dumb like me and thought he was going to be the Isaiah Hawthorne, just because looking at box score numbers. And then, that VMI team went like 2-29 last year. They're not in a very good conference, so you kind of have to balance things a little bit like that. But he's a guy where I want him back just to see what he can do in like a 6-man role. But I would understand if he was one that ended up looking somewhere else. Same with Luka Kolchig. I think he's probably done for the season. Broken wrist or some sort of injury to his, I think it's his non-shooting arm, but still, you can't really play out there in a cast. He was a highly touted JUCO guy coming in. He's another one where I don't know where his place on UNC's team is moving forward. I think he's really, really skilled. It's just fitting into this offense, and maybe a year under his belt, another year in this system that's pretty complex, whether it be terminology or just kind of concepts, that he may kind of skyrocket up the depth chart just with how he's able to shoot and dribble kind of at his size. But I think he's ultimately been a little bit disappointing this season. I don't know if for fans, but I think he's probably a little bit disappointed with how this season's played out, as our most probably 9th men who transfer, and it's not quite what they're expecting. And then Big Bill Humor. That's one of Jacob's. I don't know if anybody else calls him that, but I love the name Big Bill. He's another who knows, man. I like one of those I could see him leaving. He's been awesome. Like he's not hasn't contributed like an incredible amount on the floor, but I just love his presence around everything. Like he's one of the most excited on the bench. He's just seems to be a great vibes guy. So it's just, again, who knows? Like, is he there? Who's the Mecky Cameron last year ended up just didn't really play for UNC. He's off to, I think, Eastern Tennessee State. Let me see if I can get a quick Google. But in one game earlier in the season, he scored like 28. So he's, I bet there are some. It's Tennessee Tech, my mistake. But there are a lot of players on this team like that. I think where just they're very good, and it's not even that UNC's like a dominant program that's like great, though this year they're doing pretty good. But it's all fit in this, like, at this level. Like a lot of, I'm sure William Humer could be playing just as much as Egan Shields, or like that type of thing. It's just all where you kind of find it. When you got hurt during the wrong time and you just kind of slipped. So there's a lot of variance. And then these guys are the red shirts, so we haven't seen them at all this year. I actually forgot one person, Roddick Homer, who I love. He backup point guard, has only played 2 or 3 games this season, I think, but he's just like he's a pregame warm up highlight reel. Like he can fly, man. What is he? 6'2", 185, white kid from Highlands Ranch. You wouldn't expect it. But it's funny, him and Jaron really end every pregame warm up. He throws down like an easy dunk where his head is like at the rim, and then Jaron like jumps and does his absolute best to like get the ball over the rim, and it works out about half the time. But he redshirted last year, I believe, so he is a freshman this year. He's just outside of the rotation. I don't know what the plans are for him. Is he a guy that's just kind of here and he's like developing to transfer down a level? Is he a guy that's going to jump out at us next year? I don't really know. I'm excited because I enjoy his presence and I like watching him, but I'm not quite sure really where he fits in all of this. Another guy I really like watching in pregame warmups, Reek Maween. I apologize, Reek. Just high flyer. He's a freshman, but he's 21 with like how the prep school calendar works. And I'm not exactly sure how he ended up that old, but he's from Sioux Falls, South Dakota. Come here. Another guy, just freak athlete. I'm not sure where the basketball side of things are because every like practice or warm up I've watched has been mostly just walk through things, a lot of focused on the starters and those guys who are getting minutes. But he's exciting for next year. And then Walker Asp from Palmer High School, 6'8". He's only 160. Him and Hunter Caldwell need to put on some weight. Hunter Caldwell is like my favorite. The idea of Hunter Caldwell is my favorite player on this team. He was Lutheran, 6'10", but he only grabbed like 7 rebounds a game in high school and shot like 57% from 3. So I don't know exactly what his game is at this level because I'm sure it's not going to be that. But maybe he's a 4 that just shoots, and I don't know how his handle is. But and then not to forget anybody, we have Victor Lukic Gavrik. Haven't seen much of him. Just like same idea. Haven't been to a place where he's showcased himself. But I think those redshirt guys are all fairly safe bets to be back next year, barring whatever house settlement may limit scholarships. I don't know who's exactly even on scholarship. So I think if I had to guess, those would be back. Langston Reynolds, obviously the biggest contender to leave. And then I'm hoping with most of the other contributors, we're in a good spot. And it may be that like spots 8 through 10 on the end of the bench that somebody needs to step up to. And I don't know if I'm sure that ends up coming through transfer portal somewhat, but there's also a lot of capable players, at least seemingly capable people to kind of backfill those positions. And last but not least, this one's kind of tied in. This one could have been as part of the last question, but I'm lazy, so I made it its own. How long do we have Steve Smiley for? This one makes me a little sad because I love Smiley. I love both the way he coaches, the type of teams he runs, and also just the guy he is. He's a politician in the best way, which as a media guy, like I love that because he spent pushing 10 years, I think, at Sheridan College up in northern Wyoming as that basketball coach and AD. And I think when you're the AD, you like it. I think that's why he's so charismatic. I'm sure that's part of just who he is, but he's in fun. He's a big fundraiser. He can talk to the boosters. I think he's willing to do a lot of that I think other coaches just don't have any interest in. And I think it's huge. The way he's getting like trying to garner attention on campus. He has players out giving tickets away. He mentioned he's going with players to sorority meetings and frat meetings trying to like garner interest in the team to like fill up the stadium. And it sucks that he has to do that when the team is good enough that if anybody watched them, they would want to come to the game. But that's just kind of how it is at UNC, like there's interest when they're good, and interest has been a little bit up, but it's not really. It's weird. It seems like Twitter interest is up and everybody across the country loves this team and all the diehard fans are like on it, but it hasn't contributed to the general student body, because like all the student section's just pretty empty a lot of the time. Like it's been full in a couple games, but it's mostly full of football players, and it's because that's like a game that the coaching staff deems one of like the important ones, and you can like get points for their whole system through. But it's a bummer, like in one of those videos, Langston was interviewing and he found Peter Costelli on campus, and it was like Wednesday, and he was like, "Hey, who's the basketball team playing tomorrow?" And he had no idea, which especially sucks coming from like a football player who I'm sure has their own things going on, but it feels like 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 a team support each other type of thing. But like not to hate on the football team because they have. I think Ed Lamb is actually a big proponent of that same thing. Like, let's get out to games. They'll come out to our games. Building those relationships between teams. But back to Smiley, I got a little distracted. It's no like surprise. It's no real question. UNC is UNC is not anybody's retirement job, really. Like nobody's like working up, and UNC's the peak. That may be the case for like that may end up. I don't even think it could. That Montana could be. I think Montana State could be. I can't think of who the Vermont coach's name is, but a program like that, I just don't think UNC's in that spot. They just don't have any money. It sucks, but like that's where it's at. Like they're driving to bus to DIA, going through just normal security. Can't even do the bridge security because they closed that down. And then they're flying to. Like if you listen to some of like I've learned a bit firsthand traveling how much of a pain in the ass this can be, and we're doing 2 people. They're doing 23, I think, is their travel party. There are games like the road trips, or what was last week was Idaho, Eastern Washington. That's like you fly into Spokane, have to drive down. I think it's about 2 hours south down to Moscow, Pullman area, play that game, like stay the night, drive back up the 2 hours to Cheney, Spokane area, and that's like not even the worst of them. Montana is a 3-hour bus ride over a couple mountain passes between Bozeman and Missoula. I think you have Weber State, Idaho State are travel partners. That one's a little chopped up this year because that's our Monday games. But that's you can't fly into Pocatello, I don't believe. Maybe you can. But it's just like I could see why if you get a chance to go to a Power 5 school that flies a small charter plane out of the airport 15 minutes down the road, and you can leave and come home after every game. Like it's honestly like a no-brainer type of thing. There's a much higher pressure. I think UNC's in a good spot, where a tricky spot where they have to be loyal and patient, but you kind of have to be loyal and patient to all the coaches you have. So like it's a good thing. I think Smiley's like the right guy, and I still believe Ed Lamb's the right guy. So there is like perks, but I just think like the greater idea of what could be better is very appealing. Smiley's in his 5th season. I didn't realize this until I was doing a little research to prep for this. He's 1 win away from tying Jeff Linder at 80 career wins, and 7 wins away from tying BJ Hill at 86, who I pray to God they get 6 more wins this season so BJ Hill can just be completely out of UNC's record book, even though I think he technically is, because, they vacated a bunch of things as he was having players take, or he's having people take tests for the players, which is crazy at the Big Sky level that you're doing that. Like, and crazy that you're fucking doing that to finish 500 every season. You really couldn't get anybody any good in here when they didn't even have to do the school part. So just but that being said, UNC's first D1 coach was Craig Rasmussen, who had 7 years total, but 2 at the D1 level, went 13-45, and then resigned. Tad Boyle was only 4 years, actually 56-66, which is crazy, but like the first couple years he just had nothing to work with. He went on to CU, still there. BJ Hill, 86-98. He was there for 6 years, and he had okay success. He was very, very whatever. Funny enough, his show cause penalty expired in 2023. I don't see anybody knocking down doors to hire him, but if they wanted to. But then Linder has been, if you're just looking at numbers, by far the most successful UNC basketball coach. 80-50 in 4 years, 20 win a year average, which is just nuts at a place like UNC. That's just not. The disadvantages for basketball aren't as strong as the disadvantages for football, at least in my opinion. But that's crazy. 20 wins a season, have that CIT championship tournament win. Yeah, I said that right. Or the CIT championship, won the CIT tournament. Those are the two thoughts I melded together. But like Smiley's right there. I think if this year continues the way things are going so far, it's going to be the best year in UNC D1 history, most likely, which is crazy. But it's just and I think this is still like not, I don't want to say Smiley's like riding the momentum of the Linder era, but I think it's helpful when you have a guy in front of you who leaves for a better job instead of getting fired. Because especially at that time, he took a couple recruits. I can't think of the Gonzaga kid who I believe's out for the year, but played at Wyoming the past couple years, was a UNC commit, flipped to Wyoming when Linder left. But UNC was able to keep a lot of the players, with Smiley stepping up. That continuity stayed, and it feels like he's taken it to another level now. And I don't think it's a guarantee that he'll leave, because maybe that's how it sounded in the way I've talked so far. But there's a lot of things working in UNC's favor too. First up, he's a Colorado guy, born and raised Arvada. His wife, I don't know if born and raised in Cheyenne, but that's where her family's at now. So like Greeley's basically smack dab in the middle of those two. He's mentioned his wife has a good job that she really likes, and I think he said she just never was able to find anything when he was in Ogden at Weber. So like, I think that bodes very well for us. The staff is weirdly local. Like we talked about this a couple weeks ago, so I won't harp on it. But Smiley, Colorado; Dorian Green, CSU guy; Houston Reed, Colorado guy; Brett Klopfel coached Greeley West High School before this, so as local as it can get. Colin Gauss, an alumni, and DeAndre Campbell's the only one who doesn't have like a direct tie to Colorado, which is crazy. So obviously, if he goes, that doesn't mean the whole staff just up and follows him. Honestly, chances are probably pretty good that one of the assistants end up taking over for him. I mean, it worked out last time. Why not give it another go? So it's just I don't see Smiley just leaving for the first job that's open. I think it would have to be something that's either too good for him to pass up in like a Power 5 school. I think is probably that. Or maybe Medved moves on from CSU and he just doesn't even have to move. He already lives in Windsor. He can just start driving the other direction every morning. I don't think he's just going to up and leave for like I don't know, Missouri Valley team, or I'm trying to think, or even like a San Francisco, who's like a West Coast like, I don't think he's just going to up and get out for any opportunity. I think it has to be the right opportunity. And maybe that's just wishful thinking, but I do think he has a little bit more to him than just like that. Just the standard coach that UNC is a stepping stone for. And as much shit as the athletic department gets, like, especially because they get a lot of shit because football sucks. But kudos, I think they've done a great job in hiring basically most of the coaches they've hired in the past 10 years. Sans like McCaffrey and maybe one or two others that just kind of, nobody really noticed and they just went away. But every other program's pretty solid. Women's basketball is struggling this year, but they had a big win against BYU. Men's basketball has been great for the past, not great, but very successful for the past like 10, pushing 10 years now. What do we got? Volleyball is basically the Big Sky powerhouse. Just all of these good programs, especially the ones that are kind of in the limelight or secondary limelight behind football. So I pray to God, pray to a God that I don't believe in, that Steve Smiley will be around for a while. But I do take some solace in. I think I think it'll have to be the right thing for him to leave, and he's not just looking to up and get out of town. Which would almost be understandable if he was, but he's got a very exciting season. We have NAU tomorrow, might be today by the time this comes out, but this is fairly green, so I figured it didn't matter too much what day we released it. Yeah, what do you think? Sorry, I did not by any stretch of my imagination think I was going to go for 57 minutes, but I'm sick of the sound of my own voice, so I'm sure you are too. So as always, if you like what we do, please like, subscribe, all that good stuff. Comment for the algorithm. Tell your friends to comment. Tell them to tell their friends to comment. If you don't like what we're doing, leave the nastiest message you can think of in Ben's inbox, because he's not here to fight back on that comment today. Have a good one.